Hello and welcome to IPC Global Channel. My name is Igor Alcantara and today we're going to talk about descriptive statistics. When you are presented to a new data source, before writing any charts, before developing anything in any business intelligence or data science tool, we need to understand the data that we're working with. We need to describe that data. And in order to understand the data, the best tool that we have is the descriptive statistics. It's how we use the statistics to describe an information. When we are presented by a number, let's say a price of a product, if we have the descriptive statistics of that number, then we can identify if that particular price is typical or not, if it is an outlier, if it is above or below average, and other useful informations. So I'm going to show you how we can do that using Qlik Sense. I'm presenting you with some very basic descriptive statistics metrics that comes by default when you add a new object in Qlik. So we have the basic count that shows how many objects we have, how many rows of a particular value we have. So in this case, I'm showing how many orders we have. We also have the average, which is basically the sum of a particular value divided by the quantity, which is the count, the mean value, and the max value. Of course, we also have the sum, which was excluded from this because I want to focus on other metrics. But this is not all we can do with Qlik and descriptive statistics. There are more we can do. Let's focus first on the average. What is an average and what does an average mean? Average is a type of measure we call central tendency measure. It is designed to show you what is the center of your data. But it's also designed to show you what is a typical or more likely value. Let's say you have a bet with a friend and you're going to take any product randomly and you need to find what is the price of the product. Whoever gets closer to the real price wins the challenge, wins the bet. So a good bet is to shoot by the average because it's a center data, so it is more likely to be the price that we chose. However, that is not always true. Let's see how this price falls under all the prices that we have. Let me click Edit Sheet. And then I'm going to add a new object. So I'm going to Charts, and I will choose a histogram. So histogram is basically our chart that shows frequency of a number. It's a very unique type of chart that you can only use for numeric values. Not only that, it has to be numeric and integer. So let me click Add Field, and I have unit price here, but I have a unit price version that is integer. So let me choose that, and then we have our histogram. Let me maximize that so we can take a better look. See that most of the prices are between $0 and $200. This is less than half of the average. So let's try to locate the average in the histogram. So 460, it will be somewhere in here. This is not a very popular region in my histogram. So if I use that in my bet, my chances to get it right are not very good. My chances to get it right if I get a price between 0 or 2, because most of the products have a price in that range. So why is the average so much higher than what the histogram shows? Well, it's because we have some products that are so expensive, they're over $3,000, that they push the average up. So how do I know then what is a more likely price? What is a better center tendency measure? Well, let's put this on the side and let's add more descriptive statistics measures. So let me simply copy this and paste, and let's change the calculation. Notice that when you go to a KPI, you have the option to change the measure, the aggregation of the KPI. But the only options you are displayed are the basic ones, the ones that we saw plus sum. If you want to do something different, you actually need to go to the expression. So let me expand this, click the FX button, and then we can work this measure. Another type of central tendency measure is what we call the median. The median is what number is in the middle of your distribution. So basically, you take all of your numbers, you put in order, and you take the one that is in the center, meaning that 50% of the values is below that number and 50% will be above that number. That number is in the center. So that is another measure of center tendency. So notice that the median is much lower. It means 50% of the prices are cheaper than $29.99, and 50% are more expensive than that number. So that is a better bet if I want to guess what is the price of a random product. Median is not necessarily better than the average. It depends on the scenario. The median has a problem. It does exclude the effect of outliers. Outliers meaning numbers that are very high or very low compared to the rest of the numbers. So you need to decide what you want it to display and what makes sense. So those are two of the central tendencies measures, but not the only one. So let's copy this object again and let's show another option. Again, that option is not available unless you go to the function and write it yourself. So the other option is what we call the mode. Mode is basically the most popular item. It means the item with the biggest frequency, the item that shows more frequently. Let me click then apply, and we'll see that is $4.99. It means that is the most common price, most popular price. So you got to decide which of these three central tendencies measures makes sense to your bet. I'm talking about this bet as an exercise, but of course you can use these measures for multiple reasons and multiple applications inside your data. But those are not the only descriptive statistics measures that we have. Another useful type of measure that we need to know is how dispersed is our data, meaning how different they are from each other. So I'm going to show you different ways to calculate variation in your data. The most simple way to display variation in your data is by taking every individual value, subtract that to the average, what we call in statistics the mean, square the difference, so the negative and positive values will not cancel each other out, and then you take the sum of the differences squared and you divide it by the number of elements you have, the n. That's what we call the sigma square or the variance. So the variance is basically an average of the square differences in the data. That sounds complicated, but that will be simple to do in Qlik. However, variance has a problem. The number displayed is always a squared number, and it's very hard to understand what it means. So we have an option that is basically the square root of the variance. There is the formula, very similar, but it's a square root, and we call that sigma or standard deviation. Standard deviation, it's very simple to calculate in Qlik. So let's add now a new KPI, and let's add a field which is unit price. No, And let's click Add Measure. But instead of selecting a field, let's click f of x and let's write the expression. So the formula for standard deviation is Stdev. And then in parentheses, name of field, unit, price. That gives me 919.2. So that is in dollars. That means that's the average variation that I have in my data. Again, don't get confused about the terms variation and variance. Variance is this square. We do not have a function for variance, but if you want to calculate the variance, you need to do this and square it using the whole function. So it's going to do that, the second degree, and then we have the variance. We also have another way to measure dispersion. It's what we call the standard error, which is basically the standard deviation divided by the square root of the number of items. And we do have a function for that as well. So let me copy this. And we're going to show what it is, and I'll explain the concept behind. It's going to be Sterr. And then showing us $3.81. So that doesn't make a lot of sense when you see in a summary vision, but basically the concept of a standard mean of error is how much you can trust your average to be the true center tendency measure. That is better known when you display this by categories. Let's say we could do product lines and display this by product line, so we'll see what products have less variance than the other products. Finally, there's another measure that we do not have a way to calculate directly in Qlik, but is very important. That measure is called the coefficient of variance. The coefficient of variance is basically the standard deviation divided by the average. So it's basically a scale version of the standard deviation. So let me copy the standard deviation, and we can see how that works. So I can then change the properties and simply add divided by average, which is function AVG, field unit price, and then I have this. This basically shows the standard deviation is scaled by the amount of the average. Those are the main measures for descriptive statistics in Qlik Sense. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. See you next time.